Look out! It's just two mediocre white dudes on film.
We're back again.
Oh, back again.
So happy we're back, like more consistently. Like it feels like we took a long time off, and
I am too, except it's fucking with your voice. You hear that? You sound like
did.
you got like smoker's lung because you've been talking too much with me.
It might be. We spent a long time on the phone the other day, and that was a good time.
We have been actually, like, legitimately. You're right. We had like an hour long phone call, and we hadn't done that in like a minute.
Yeah. It was nice to catch up that way. We always catch up every time we get on the show. We talk like beforehand for that, like 45 minutes before we start recording. And it's funny enough.
It's a podcast in and amongst itself.
That's the funniest thing. Like people get on us sometimes for like, I remember somebody put in our video, like, well, they get to the review somewhere about 45 minutes in. I'm like, well, welcome to the show.
But it even happened last week. Someone on our Big Blue Box podcast was like, wow, you guys weren't kidding. It takes you almost 30 minutes to talk about Doctor Who. And I was like, no, not quite true. We talked about Doctor Who in the first 30 minutes and other things.
Other things definitely happen. So just so you know out there, even though there's 30 minutes beforehand before we get to our topic of discussion, there's actually another 30 minutes that you're not getting. Maybe I should just hit record and that can be Patreon content or like that.
I almost wonder if they're relieved hearing that they don't have to listen to it, or if they're sad that they don't have to listen to it. And I'm not like, there's probably a thin line about this big. And somewhere along the way, they're like, man, that sounds great. But also, man, I don't want to listen to them talk that much anymore.
I think there's actually a divide. I think there's some people who would absolutely hate it and be like, what the hell are you doing? They actually might not listen anymore. There are some people out there that are masochistic enough that they might want to listen to more. And, more power to them. We love them. They're probably our patrons that are our best supporters.
They're also the people who love Puppet Master.
That's true. They are the people who love Puppet Master. Virtually insane as PJ is. So
exactly.
You know what? I'll say it before, I'll say it again. I think we should do the first Puppet Master in a grouping of like movies. This is our category. I'll pitch it. Movies that have way too many sequels that we don't want to do the franchise of, but we'll do the first one.
It sounds boring. Can't do it. I'm sorry.
Puppet Master
go big or go home here, man. Look, we've done some pretty terrible movies.
That's true.
We've done some pretty terrible movies, and it's only going to get better from here. I mean, worse. Or I mean, better.
The problem is that we've done some terrible movies, but they've been in overall good franchises. So the problem with Puppet Master, let's be honest with ourselves. If you are honest with yourself right now.
Oh, I know.
There's a lot more horrible than good.
Oh, yeah. I would argue everything, like, honestly, after, like, the sixth one, it starts going downhill real fast. And, like, they're enjoyable, but they're real bad.
Right.
Some of the newer ones are okay. I do love that they've really leaned in on, like, what if we just put these puppets in Nazi-occupied Germany and let the puppets kill Nazis? Like, I do love that. Yeah. So, like, there's two separate trilogies of just puppets killing Nazis, which, I'm not mad about.
Well, I'll say this. Let me also put it out there that there are movies that are bad movies that are fun to watch, but necessarily wouldn't be movies that are fun to podcast about.
Yeah, but you know what? You're not wrong, and yet it's us. Like, it would be one of the better versions of us doing this versus where it's like Annabelle. I legitimately hate it. And like every time people get to that episode that are like listening through our podcast for the first time, they go, we've known you for so long and you're such an optimistic and hopeful person. And I've never felt like you wanted to burn the world to the ground until you were talking about that movie.
And rightfully so. I think I was exactly the same way.
Yeah.
I'm all like that too on this podcast, and like I'm known for it in class action sometimes. Every once in a while, my anger gets out in class action. We start comparing movies, and I'm like, oh, I'm more in a battle mode then anyway, because I'm putting up two movies against each other. So that kind of like brings it out. But in our podcast, I always tend to try to be more positive than negative. I do too. When you're doing a franchise, you're not just picking. You have to commit to it's the OCD. You have to commit to the entire franchise. Yeah. You're gonna come up with bummers, unfortunately.
Well, it's funny because a little behind the scenes, we've kicked around plenty of franchises that we've thought about doing, and at one point, we did start thinking about doing the X-Men movies, but it was the same thing where it was like, man, we're gonna have to slog through some stuff that I really don't want to talk about because it's gonna end up being like. And I'm not even talking about the behind the scenes of it all. Like, right. I'm talking about, like, just bad movies that, like, make me angry. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I don't like being, or most of the time I don't like being that way. I feel like I get, it's one of those things. So interestingly enough, and I'm gonna go back to something we talked about. If you haven't listened to our episode of Big Blue Box last week, this kind of ties into what we were talking about. But I've been listening to a lot of Films to Be Buried With recently, the Brett Goldstein podcast, and I put you onto it. Fun,
Yes. I am halfway through the Kevin Smith episode right now, by the way,
dude.
just so you know.
It's so good.
I can't believe, like you said, I'm going to interject. I'll let you go back, I promise.
Yeah.
But you mentioned, first of all, I just told my wife this story. I still, even after a season full of shrinking, I still have a hard time with Brett Goldstein's voice.
100%.
I just expect Roy Kent, and I'm getting this like higher pitch, almost sometimes
He's
not
like
effeminate,
us.
but it's
He's
like
enthusiastic.
He's very enthusiastic. Gets like higher up there. He's talking very nicely. I'm like, that's not Roy Kent, and it shows exactly how awesome he is. But yeah, but he is one of us, and I could never be more sure of that, except for the Kevin Smith episode, which is from 2019. So maybe he wasn't as big there. Ted Lasso really hadn't been a thing yet. But
It
like,
was still newer.
He went to a press junket to do this best podcast for him. Like Brett Goldstein went to a junket. Like it blows my mind, kind of thing. It's like that's a phenomenal thing. But yeah, this podcast, by the way, definitely is awesome. It's definitely guest dependent. There's like 300 some odd episodes. You're not gonna be able to catch up. I'm not gonna even bother trying. But I did go through and like I have like 10 or 11 like some of my favorite like people that I'm like, oh, I want to listen to Kevin Smith. Oh, I want to listen to Jason Sudeikis. Oh, I want to listen to like Felicia Day. And
Well, did you see who he dropped today?
Oh, did you drop one today? I didn't see it.
Lee Winnell.
Oh, that's definitely I gotta add to my list now. There's another one.
Yeah. But so funny enough, I've been listening to it, and it's interesting because in this regard, and I'm sure that the Lee one will be the same way, but I was listening to the James Wan episode.
Right.
And I'm texting Paul while I'm listening to it because again, it's very guest dependent on how I've been listening to it. I do eventually want to go back to listen to the ones in between, but like I'm listening to people that I've loved who make movies, who have been on TV shows. Like I'm listening to those ones because I want to hear their thoughts. Right. And James Wan talked about it. Like a couple of others have talked about it, but they do this thing where he asks, "What's the worst movie you've ever seen?"
Yep.
And a lot of them won't answer because they work in the industry and they don't like attacking other people's work because you spend a lot of time being so hard on a movie that a lot of people still worked on. Like someone still woke up and like did craft services that day. Someone built those sets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so like, because of that, I am aware because we have friends who are around the space. Like one of our friends who I used to podcast with, Patrick Hogue, he just announced yesterday, he's going to make his first feature film. Awesome. He's going to be doing it independently. He's going to be shooting it this summer, which Patrick, congratulations. I'm proud of you for failing upwards, my friend. You could only go up from our podcast back in the day. So I applaud you. But because of that, like, I'm still going to be honest. Don't get me wrong. But it gets hard. Like, and you'll see it in the episodes of movies that we don't like. We're just trying to get through it. And we'll spin our wheels even longer to talk about it and then get out just as fast.
Yeah, that's
like, I think the Halloween 5 one is like notorious for that. Like the Halloween 5 podcast is rough because both of us are like, we don't really want to talk about this.
It's a franchise we love. That's a problem. It's like, well, I mean, it's the same time. It's like you have all these, like as I mentioned before, all these movies in a franchise. Like we love a Halloween franchise. We're like big fans of the Halloween franchise. So even like the worst Halloween movie is still Michael Myers movies, but it's like, because we love the franchise so much, we really, really hate shitting on a movie like that because like that's one of our babies to a degree. Not that we had anything to do with it, but it's like that part.
No, but it means something to us.
Donald Pleasance is in there still. I mean, it's still something we love. Jamie Lloyd, Danielle Harris is in it. We love Danielle Harris in the role, and it's like, oh, there's something I want to like, and I want, but like, it's in other ways we get actually sometimes more critical because we're like, we know you can do a better job because we've seen a better job in this franchise.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of to that point, that's kind of what I've been doing with the Nightmare films. Weirdly enough, because unlike Paul, and I think it's been better in a lot of ways for the podcast because there's a lot of my feelings for the Nightmare franchises. I've made it like very clear. Nightmare was never my it wasn't my franchise.
You're back, right?
Halloween was my franchise when it came to the like big three. Friday is a very close second, even with its lows. but I never got into Nightmare the same way that Paul did. And like, I like Freddy Krueger as a concept and as a character, but I never really revisited the films. And that even comes down to the one we're talking about today, which is Nightmare 5. I hadn't seen this film in probably 15 years.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
legitimately. I never revisited it, like, and I, even I talked about it when we watched the third one. I was like, I really couldn't tell you the last time I had watched it. Like, if I had remembered how much I was gonna like that one, I probably would have watched it more. But
Right.
I don't go out of my way to watch the Nightmare stuff usually. Usually what happens is I watch through the Friday films and then I go, "Cool, Freddy versus Jason." And, like, that's kind of my Freddy exposure for
Right.
like a year. And
Right.
then like I'll read the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash comic. And again, it's not like a dig or anything. It's
No.
just Nightmare was never like that thing for me. So it's allowed us on the podcast for me to like look at it a little differently and go, man, where the stuff I really enjoy, I do enjoy, but I pick at it a little more because I also look at it like there is things that they should have done here. There's things they should have done here. Like just to flesh it out a little more or connect it a little more.
You don't have nostalgia for it like I do.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. And it's kind of interesting though. I definitely at it from an interesting angle as well because Nightmare was mine growing up. But even before Halloween, before Jason, that was the one I gravitated towards Nightmare. So I love the idea of. To me, it's kind of funny. Like a young me, I criticize myself for being young because I dismissed kind of, oh, Jason and Michael, they're both just silent guys in masks. It's kind of boring. Freddy's kind of funny. He's
We
kind of
fell into the film bro thing.
creative. Yeah, absolutely. And like
Yeah.
I loved it so much. But then like as I grew older, I gotta be honest, I really came into Halloween and Friday more. And even I actually pushed Nightmare down to the side for a bit because it was like the new and fresher thing. And it didn't hurt it that Nightmare was really out of the loop for a long time. After
Comparatively, yeah.
comparatively, absolutely. Halloween at least was back on the zeitgeist a little bit. Um, but now it's interesting coming back to these films now after I kind of going full circle. I definitely still have nostalgia. Like Nightmare 3, still one of my favorite horror movies of
Mhm.
all time. And I love it so much. But I had an interesting take on this one because I feel like I mentioned this in a text to you. I feel like every time I watch it, it's dependent on the time I previously watched it. I go back and
Mhm.
forth because I always watch it and I go, like last time I watched it before this viewing, I was like, "Oh, this is not good. This is really pretty shitty." And this time, I liked it a lot more, and I think it's because I keep setting the bar differently. It's like
Yeah.
when they're going, I'm expecting shit. Oh, it's great. It's pretty good. I'm next time I watch, I'll probably, oh, it's not that bad, and I'll watch it and go, whoa, this is actually pretty shitty. What the hell am I thinking? It kind of goes back and forth on it. It's
It
so weird.
it's so interesting too. So, you had texted me that and
Mhm.
you were like, but because I kept telling you, I was like, dude, I really don't know what I'm getting into. I haven't seen this movie in a long time. I really don't remember it. Like, I didn't and you were like, "Don't even get your hopes up for it being good." You were like, "I liked it, but that doesn't
Right.
mean that it's good."
Right.
And you kept trying to be like, you were downplaying it so hard, and it was adorable because I'm sitting there going, "Oh man, Paul is like." I really thought we were gonna get into one of those podcasts, and I actually texted you because I'll say this, for about the first 15 minutes, I was, like, not having it with the movie. I was just not having it. The opening is I don't know why Stephen Hopkins was like, "I'm gonna direct it like I'm making fucking Body Heat." Like, it's this weird blue sex scene that over like, with credits overlaid. Like, it's trying to be this highbrow film,
Right.
and I'm just like, "What the fuck is happening?" And I texted Paul, I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, this is not happening." But about 16 minutes in, suddenly I was like, "I'm kinda gelling with this now."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not gonna say it's, like, amazing, but I think it's a lot better than it gets credit for.
That is where I ended up too, and I actually had a very similar I think one of the first notes I wrote when I taken this down, I'm like, "What is with, like, the red, A Nightmare, and that, like, chrome blue on Elm Street, like, logo
Yeah.
they use?" I'm kinda like, This is so weird. This is not at all a horror opening like that. It's more of a sexy erotic thriller type of opening,
Yeah, and
like
there's, like,
Body Heat, like you
so much
said,
nudity too.
right? I'm
There's
like, "What is
never been
going
more
on?"
nudity in a Nightmare film until
I was
now.
confused. Yeah, I was very confused by it. But I did eventually end up gelling with it. I gel with it because they took a lot of swings. They took a lot of swings with lore without like I mean, every horror movie retcons a little bit, but this retcons kind of felt like more, at least reachable
Yeah,
retcons. Like they
it's
kind of
not one
felt
of the like it.
that rejected everything. It was kind of like it kind of expanded on some things a little bit, maybe one different way than I thought it would have
Yeah,
gone. But it was kind of a cool swing, and it had some interesting ideas to it, and that's
and
what I liked.
it's so funny because it also we talked about this a lot. If you ever go back and listen to the Friday the 13th franchise podcast, because we had already covered Halloween,
Yeah,
and it's funny when we're talking about like the night or the Friday films after covering Halloween, because they tended to like tag each other, where
yeah,
like Halloween would do something and Friday was like, well, fuck it, we're gonna do it too. And like they would go and tag it. And so they would try to do the same thing with like a hospital sequence or
right.
something. It's so funny because I kind of feel like Halloween 6 is trying super hard to tag off of this film.
Oh
Not
wow.
just Halloween 5, but Halloween 6 with the whole thing with her having a child that's related to Michael and all of
Yeah.
this, like, all of that stuff that is in Halloween 6 and the cult and all of that kinda comes from this.
A
Like,
little bit.
a little bit. Like, it just feels like they're kinda going, "Oh, we see you, and we're gonna tag you, and we're gonna do our version of it." And
Right.
so, like, it's kind of fun, and I love that the big 3 did this so
Yeah.
frequently. And I gotta say, I did not know Stephen Hopkins directed this. And Stephen Hopkins, everyone listening is gonna go, "That is not a name worth knowing." But for me, he's the guy who did Ghost in the Darkness, of
Yeah.
course, but for me, he did my favorite Predator film, which is Predator 2.
Right. Right.
I'm not saying it's the best Predator film, but I'm saying it's my favorite.
And that's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah, he also directed, Lost in Space, the
And Matt
the
LeBlanc.
with Matt LeBlanc and,
What?
Gary Oldman and
Mhm.
William Hurt and
Did he
Heather
also
Graham.
did he also do that weird one, Judgment Night? Wasn't that
Yes,
the,
he did. He
right?
sure
Yeah.
did.
That's right.
Like, he's not and it's so funny because 'cause you'll read interviews with him and he's like, "Dude, I just wanted to make movies and I wanted to make better movies, but I could never get anything other than the things that they kept giving me." And the poor dude has like every one of his films in some capacity has been like taken away and like edited down, like this one even
Right.
in some capacity. It feels like Predator 2 was like the only film he ever made that didn't
Mm.
have that like be a thing outside of race, because apparently, and I like Ghost in the Darkness, but I was reading an interview with him when I was going down this rabbit hole, and he was like, he can't even watch that movie because it was gutted and changed so much, and I
I
had
remember
no
reading
idea.
that. Yeah, I remember actually reading all about that, those interviews he had. He was very upset about that. I remember that, for sure.
So,
Yeah, he's
yeah,
interesting. He's definitely an interesting director. He's actually, I just realized, looking at it now, I kind of glanced over. I didn't even know he did a 2023 Apple Plus TV show with Vincent Cassell and Eva Green called
yeah,
Liaison, and I never watched it. But man, I'm
I'm
considering
gonna
it
have to
because
check
that's a
that
good
out.
cast. That's a good cast. Apple TV hasn't missed really. They've been really good at like
Yeah,
putting out quality stuff. So hey, give it a shot. Why not? Because
I
this is one thing about this film. I'll go back to it real quick. Is the direction's definitely not the fault here at all. I think he
no,
directed the hell out of it, to be honest.
and actually, that's what I was gonna say. Is funny enough, like the one thing about this movie more than anything, I think that it's directed beautifully,
Yeah.
and I'm
Weird
actually
body heat decisions aside.
yeah, well, again, fuck you, but also yes. Um, it's so interesting because he directed the Dark Tower pilot
Okay.
for Amazon that didn't happen. Like
Oh,
they
right.
directed like they made the pilot and Amazon didn't go forward with it. And all I can think is I hope that somehow it leaks out, because I bet you the one thing I would say is I bet it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, that's the one thing, because Lost in Space, Ghost in the Darkness, Predator 2, it really doesn't matter. You throw a fucking dart at any of the movies in his filmography, they all look great.
Yeah.
So it's actually I kinda hope that if they do go through with this Mike Flanagan Dark Tower, I actually hope Hopkins kinda gets a call, because I would love to see him at least get to direct an episode or 2.
Yeah, well, I'd be all for that. I mean, like, he makes low budget stuff look good. That's for sure. Like, this is like a
Oh, for
$8 million
sure.
movie, but it looks a lot bigger than that. I gotta be honest.
With that, I texted you that. That was
Yeah,
the one
good.
thing last night I texted you. I was like, I looking at this movie, You would have never made me believe it was only made for $8 million. And now, like, I'm not. I need to remember also 8 million in the '80s would have gotten you a lot farther than it would now, et cetera, et cetera. But like, this movie looks amazing. The kills are amazing. The makeup is amazing. Like, there's so much to it that pops. It always feels very ethereal and dreamlike, and that's actually the thing I like the most about this movie is that comparatively to every other Nightmare film outside of probably the third one,
Right.
everything about the movie has you wondering if it's real or if it's fake.
Right.
And it's really good at melding that line in a way that I don't think that all the other films to that time always did. And that's not a dig, but like there's just something about the way that the when someone falls asleep, you don't even necessarily realize it. And I love that. Like you know it's happening, but the line's so blurred in a way that it feels real.
Yeah, no, I think the best way that I described it, like in my notes, is like the whole movie kind of felt like a slow burn into bringing Freddy back, and it was almost like it was so slow you didn't even realize it was there until it was there,
Right.
and that's exactly the same thing you're trying to say in a way. And at first I wondered, is like, is there too little Freddy? I texted that one, is there too little Freddy? Maybe this needs a little more Freddy at this point, and it might be because I'm used to at this point 3 and 4. Freddy was
Yeah.
starting to be wisecracking, starting to be that kind of thing, and used to him. I mean, Robert Englund is Robert Englund, so you want more
Right.
of Robert Englund, generally speaking. But you texted me back saying that maybe like it's kind of like the whole Jaws thing: don't show the monster, then it really pops when it does get shown.
Yeah.
And you're not wrong. You're not wrong there. So even when Freddy kind of has that slow burn entrance, when he is there, he definitely makes the most of his opportunities.
Yeah, and I think it's actually what made me so happy with this one in some capacity because we talked about a lot. Like Nightmare 4 is arguably too funny. Like there's too
Mhm,
much humor. It starts to dilute the character a little bit.
mhm.
Like you're just kind of sitting there going, "Motherfucker, like he needs to be scary again." And
Yeah.
I thought that this movie did a really great job of that actually. This actually might be my favorite Robert Englund performance until New Nightmare.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay.
because I think that there's something about the fact that he knows he's not gonna be in it as much, and he uses it to be, like, really taunting. Like, he's really not as wisecracking. I love the, "It's a boy!" Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
great moment, but his interactions with his mother, like, it's actually creepy, and he knows.
Yeah.
He's so, like he's trying so hard to stop this stuff from happening because he wants to get power. And so there's just this part of him, he's toying with him a little bit, but he's not being funny as much. Like, and most of the kills are actually like creepy and weird and
Mhm.
strange. Like, I gotta say, man, you're sitting there watching it, and you start bringing the characters back, obviously in the film. So you have the boyfriend,
Yeah.
Alice's boyfriend,
Right.
right? He comes back and he's here and he's barely in it because we're gonna kill Dan almost immediately.
Thank God, I gotta say, honestly, because I hate to be that negative, but, like,
Right.
he was my least favorite part of 4. He had to come back for 5. There's actually especially given the plot that he had to
Oh,
come back
sure.
for 5. But I will say I actually enjoyed him better, and I'll give him credit. Dan is at his best when he is Freddy Dan.
Yeah.
Like, Freddy kinda takes him over, and he actually I'm like, "Oh my god, he's actually showing some life as a character." I actually liked
Yeah.
this doing it this time, so I'll give him credit where credit's due. But the character itself has always been kind of a bland thing, so it's kinda
100%.
I wasn't too sad with getting him out of the way, to be honest with you. Because I
I
think he
wasn't
would have ended
either.
it. He would have
But
ended it.
he gets one of the coolest deaths in the entire franchise.
Absolutely,
And
and
not just
to your credit, you mentioned the whole not as funny thing, and I still think the perfect balance is Nightmare 3. I still think that's the perfect
yes,
balance of
100%. We
things.
agreed.
But, and 4, he did get too funny. I kinda thought, again, retroactively, like, this was worse than 4 in some ways, and I thought part of it was that he was continuing down that funny path, and I was like, "No, I realized I was wrong, that you're exactly right, he did cut back, but he cut back enough so that when he did do it, it hit well, like,
Yep.
"It's a boy," like, "Don't dream and drive," kinda like,
Mhm.
that kinda stuff made better, like, "Aha! That's Freddy for you." So I love what you're
100%.
saying that about that, absolutely.
Yeah, so with that, I really believe and, like, this is not a joke. I think that Dan's death in this film is one of the top 4 or 5 deaths in the entire franchise. And,
Yeah.
like, it's wild to say that, but when you look at the way that the sequence is put together, it's creepy, it's weird, it's terrifying, and it's long, but not in a bad way. Like, you're kinda drawn into it, and every time it's like whether Freddy is sitting in beside him in the truck and also driving and, like, tearing his arm off, or the whole for me, it's the motorcycle. Because as the sequence keeps going and he ends up on the motorcycle, and the motorcycle becomes this like weird, creepy
Hybrid.
hybrid
Like,
thing where it starts taking over his body and like ripping it apart, and he starts to look like a reject from the Mad Max movies.
I
Like,
was about to say Mad Max. Actually,
yeah,
funny you say
100%.
that.
Like, he
Yeah.
looks straight up kind of like the character from Fury Road, Immortan Joe. But like
Hmm.
it's like this weird, creepy, strange dynamic, and yet I'm so fascinated and I can't look away.
Yeah.
And it's just beautifully directed. And that's the again, the thing about this entire movie is that it looks and feels so grand compared to some of the other ones. And that goes a long way into like the credit of Hopkins in
Yeah.
what he does with it, because this is the 5th film in the franchise. You're coming off of a film that, like, it's good. It's not great. It's definitely a step down from the movie before it. And when you start getting into the 5th entry, the 6th entry, the 7th entry in a lot of these horror franchises, you're kind of spinning your wheels.
Right.
Like that's just the reality. And yet this sequence and a lot of the other stuff in this movie, now granted we'll get to it. I think the 3rd act doesn't work pretty much at all. Like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. You can tell they're just trying really hard to just wrap it up and like end the movie.
They had a great idea, but they didn't quite
Yeah.
know how to go where to go with
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I get that.
And like it happens, it's fine. But like everything leading up to it, for the most part, is a lot better than
Yeah.
I think it gets credit for.
100%, because like, I think many people out there are like me and go, step down from 4." And that's kinda what they feel like, and that's what I originally felt like. I gotta say, 2 things I wanna say. First of all, you mentioned Dan Zett, so I'm gonna mention this one now. I did think it was weird, and this is apropos to a lot of this movie for me. There's sometimes choices that were made, I'm kinda like, "I don't know if I like that choice," but then, like, but then after I sit with that, I'm like, "Yeah, but it fits the dream aspect of it." Like, Freddy ripping his arm off and me making a seatbelt out of his arm was so bizarre. I'm like, who even thought of that? What is that even like? What is going on with? I don't understand it. It's kind of a weird thing to add on to it. But beyond that, I will say what I want to bring back is I kind of wanted to organically mention this before when you talked about Halloween really tagging off this and things of that nature. But this film, the circumstances behind this film reminded me so much of Halloween 5 that it was scary to me. I even texted that to you. I was trying to explain
I
because
know.
you're like, oh, I don't like the sound of that because we hate. And I understood that
I,
because we both have our feelings about Halloween 5.
they're not that we didn't make them clear earlier, but I kind of loathe that movie.
Yeah, I kind of love that movie too. But if you look at the circumstances, we had Nightmare 4 and you had Halloween 4. Now, both were pretty good film. I mean, Nightmare 3 is more closer to Halloween 4 in terms of quality, in terms of
Yes,
the mark of the
100%.
franchise. But Nightmare 4 was pretty good and pretty solid received. So you have Nightmare 4 and Halloween 4 happening the same time, same years. And then all of a sudden, they both rushed to make a 5th sequel, like
Yeah.
a year later. They have lower budget and they're supposed to get it out really quickly. And this film definitely suffers from being rushed. I think that's if this had a little more time to cook, we could have had a better 3rd act. We could have had more of a more storyline that worked from beat to beat. In this case, it's a very messy storyline, especially when you get to the 3rd act. But if you think about it, like they're 2 movies rushed to production to get out a year later. They both bring back the main final girl for both of them. Both final girls survive the film. There's a lot of connections here to these 2 like franchises at this point.
Yeah.
Although I will say now that I thought Nightmare 5 was a lot closer to Halloween 5, and I'm saying now, Halloween 4 might be better than Nightmare 4, but Nightmare 5 is certainly better than Halloween 5.
I think that you are 100% accurate. And it's so funny because in my head, after this movie, there should be one more. Not like Freddy's Dead, but I mean another picking up at this storyline.
Mhm.
And yet New Line, and we'll get to this in the next episode, but like New Line skirts that and goes, "We're just kind of done with this franchise. We want to move on."
Right.
And it's so weird because it kind of just comes out of nowhere because this movie for all intents and purposes, is much better than it should be.
Right.
And like the fact that they go out of their way to just like wrap it up is so weird. And
Yeah.
then again, talk about another movie that'll tag it, but like Halloween 6 kind of tags that one too. Um,
Yeah.
and so again, it's the sixth film in
Halloween.
both franchises, one tagging the other.
Yeah.
And I just don't get it
Yeah. Halloween
because
6 should have obviously continued the Jamie Lloyd storyline much better. I mean, it does try to
yes,
continue the weird, like, Men in Black part of it, but that was the wrong angle to go with it. Like, Jamie dies in the first, like, giving birth. It's
and
like,
it's
what are you
not even
doing here?
Daniel Harris either.
Right. It's not even, what are you doing here with that? Like, if you're not going to have Daniel Harris in there rule, then why bother having her in there just to kill her off? Like, I'd rather have you
Right.
kill her
It
off
doesn't make
screen or
sense.
whatever. Like, don't worry about it. Like, get it out of the way. But yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. It's a weird, but it is that kind of connection, which is like, I didn't realize growing up how close these films were tied to it. I guess it's about horror creators, both in similar situations as making similar decisions. But it does feel like they're inspired from each other in a way, and necessarily not
Yeah.
necessarily the right way. That's part of the problem.
No. I think part of it is honestly too that sometimes creators will look at a thing, they're like, "That's a great idea, but I don't like how they execute it. I'm gonna try to execute it my own way." And then
Right?
it's, like, because how many times have you watched a movie and been like, "Man, I would do this differently." But
Right.
here's the thing, those guys, they're not you and I. We sit on a podcast and we talk about our feelings.
Right.
These guys are
Absolutely.
like, "We have money, we can make this work." And so they run off to do their thing, and, I kinda love it. And in hindsight, I'm glad that we're kind of getting to the end of all of this, but I've loved doing it in the capacity of it's been so interesting to compare and contrast as
Right.
you go the different times that they start tagging each other like
Yeah.
this because they all clearly build off of each other. Um,
100%.
and I love that. I think it's fun. I think it makes me smile,
Yeah.
honestly. And I gotta say, man, for what it's worth, Lisa Wilcox, very good.
Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
glad that she actually comes back in this movie. I'm not always big on the recastings. I talked about that with 4. I thought it was a mistake that they recast up front like they did because you lose something a little bit. Like, look, sometimes it happens. Obviously, like you and I are going to go see Captain America next month. Like, I'm not going to pretend we're not. I'm all in for the fact that Harrison Ford is playing
The double
the
Ross.
William Hurt role,
Yeah.
and yeah, but like that is a casting change that had to happen.
Right.
But sometimes you lose something when that stuff happens, and especially when it's something where they're trying to directly like tie it in a way that they are. And so I'm glad that Hopkins made it a point to be like, I am bringing Lisa Wilcox back. Like, make sure you pay her or give her whatever she wants because we need our Alice to be the Alice that everyone knows.
Absolutely. And she is, and she does a wonderful job. She is one of the better final girls we have in our big three, I think for sure. And I would like to see her come back more because she does live at the end of this. She does live. So technically her character is alive and well and kicking. So absolutely. Um, and I like that. I agree. I like that she's coming back. I did not like the recast either for Patricia Arquette, but though I believe that was actually more Patricia Arquette's decision
It
not
was.
to, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it
But
was, but it still makes me sad.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's funny. I am being a little hypocritical, or I said, "Oh, kill Dan off," because I didn't love when they killed off Kincaid and Joey. But at the same time, I feel like this movie made me miss Alice's brother even more. Like, I feel
Yep.
like how awesome would it have been to have him in this movie, like as a continuation to help that continuation on with her sister, with his sister, with Alice and everything else. Having Jacob's old uncle there, kind of thing. So much of a better choice. Imagine it was him instead of like say Yvonne, for example.
Yeah,
What a great opportunity, missed opportunity there.
100%. I'm glad that Nicholas Mealy comes back as her father. Dennis becomes a real character, which I really
Yes,
appreciate. Um, still, still contend he needed to be more tied to what happened.
oh
And
yeah,
it was interesting because I actually brought this up to my friend Diego yesterday. If you guys don't follow Diego Crespo on Instagram and uh, threads and stuff, please do. He does a wonderful podcast called the Waffle Press Podcast. He's been doing it for a long time. He's a photographer in Los Angeles, and I've known him a decade plus. I love him very dearly, and he really stumps for Nightmare 4 and 5. He loves them. He thinks that they're great. And so I actually brought up to him the stuff with Dennis Johnson, and he was like, "I don't know, man, like I love that he's not tied to it because you should see a world where the effects of all the of what Freddy's done like ripples out." And I was like, I would agree with you if it all also wasn't in Springwood the entire time.
Right.
But because it's all in Springwood, it just kind of feels weird that he just happens to be an alcoholic and a bad father around these kids on Elm Street. Like and he goes, "Oh, you're kind of right. Like I kind of see what you're saying because
Yeah.
to me it's not even about like making the world smaller, but it's more about if you're going to contain it to this town,
Living in the
there's
world you're in,
yeah,
basically.
exactly. And it's so like this idea that he becomes this reformed version of himself would have been amazing because it also could have ended like that could have been off of the fact that he felt like they ended it, right?
Right.
And so once they felt like they put Freddy to bed, he became better. And it would have been like an antithesis off of Nancy Thompson's father,
Right.
who
Instead, like, we
became an
have
alcoholic because of
right. Yeah, instead we kinda get this storyline, which I mean, I also like the fact that he's developed because quite frankly, we have a running gaggle of, like, horrible parents in these movies that, like, make
Yep.
horrible choices, and hell, Greta's mom in this case is actually probably worse than Kristen's mom. She is so god awful, and it's so, like, I just wanna punch her in the face, uh, the entire time she's on screen, which means the actress is doing her job because that's what she's supposed to be doing. But I love the fact that he does because they coulda easily gone for the trope that he was the alcoholic father still because they lost his son, he lost her
Yep.
brother, and it got worse for them. But instead, they chose to make him stronger and become an actual, real supporting character who has some pretty good moments in this film,
It's
much
Shrinking
better than
season 2,
yeah, 100% season two. That's what who knew that Bill Lawrence loved Nightmare on Elm Street 5.
right?
Yes. But it really worked out that way, and I love seeing that. But you are not wrong at all in that. Oh my God, the missed opportunity in which how even stronger that character could have been with that in mind, with that in place. And it wouldn't taken much.
No.
I had dialogue here, a line of dialogue there. Like it makes sense.
It's a yeah, and it's just a little thing, and I know that again, it's like me armchair imagineering and like
Yeah,
quarterbacking or whatever you wanna call it,
right.
but like, I kinda just think that it's a small thing that they could have fixed
Yeah,
and or done, um, but it is what it is.
right.
I just really still love that he's here, and I think that this is actually outside of the 3rd one, I think this is the best version of tying everything kinda together off of a previous entry or
Oh
previous
yeah.
entries.
Oh yeah.
I think that 3, 4, and 5 actually work pretty well together.
As a trilogy.
In the same way that you look at certain franchises where, like, Star Trek 2, 3, and 4 are strictly, like, a trilogy of films. Like, yes, there's more films on both sides, whether it's the original motion picture, whether it's, Final Frontier and Undiscovered Country, whatever. 3, 4, and 5 are very specifically kind of like a story,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, Voyage Home are all kind of one story.
Right.
Halloween, whether you like it or not, 4, 5, and 6 are kind of their own trilogy.
Right.
Like, it drops the ball, but they're definitely doing their thing within themselves.
Right.
So, I like that these 3 films and I really do think this one does a mostly very good job of playing off of what has been done to get us here and really land it because you still get a lot of the stuff about Freddy's mother from the
Yep.
Dream Warriors and like you get a lot of that put back in. There's that weird sequence at the beginning after the weird blue velvet body heat nonsense where that's also a little weird of but I love that it's Robert Englund, like not in makeup,
Yes. Robert
which
getting to
is
be Robert.
amazing.
That's
But
it.
that
Yeah.
whole like weird sequence within the asylum, um, and you're watching it and you're like, what the fuck? Like she's kind of dressed like the mom, obviously, and she's got the name tag, and you're like, oh god, you know exactly what they're talking about. You know exactly what's about to happen. Thankfully, the film doesn't go farther than that, but like you're having that moment where you're like, oh, this is weird and uncomfortable, but it builds into all the stuff that you know.
Right.
I really love that. Um, that you said it earlier, a lot of horror films and a lot of sequels, like retconning becomes a thing. And I kind of stopped even calling it just retconning at this point. It's just allowing a franchise to evolve, right?
Yeah.
Like taking a thing and pushing it a little farther, making you look at it a little differently. Retconning, I feel like sometimes sounds almost
Negative.
yeah, negative. Exactly. Like it sounds like you're trying to change a thing because you think it didn't work or whatever. And like maybe, but I think it's more that I like when someone looks at a thing and go, I can twist this, I can change it a little bit and like make it more interesting. So
Right.
this idea that she died, but maybe actually she didn't kill herself, like they said, and like maybe her body was not actually where you thought it was, and she knows that like her son is evil and she wants to make sure he stays dead. Like this is the second time now she's helped them. I love that. I think that's such a fun idea.
I love the inclusion of Amanda again. I agree with that too, and I didn't mind a little bit of the tweaking of that character. That was completely fine. I had a hard time a little bit with the younger version only because I really love the portrayal of her in the third one as the older,
Yeah.
like wiser Amanda. That just was something very. There's like a lot of gravitas with that version of
Oh,
the character,
totally.
which kind of gets lost with like the more like teenager-ish, not quite teenager, but like 20-year-old or whatever, Amanda Kruger, who definitely seemed like much closer to like one of the Freddy teens. Like she seemed like one of those kind of like the girls trying to be Amanda Kruger. So it kind of felt a little off that way. But and that's only not the performer's fault. That's just like that's what she looked like. It's kind of a looks thing more than anything else.
And
She
I
did a good
kind
job. She's great. And then
yeah,
in a
and I
way
think
it works. As a dream sequence, it works, especially because the whole movie is about rebirth. And
mhm.
so when she's getting into it, like her being young makes more sense in that fashion. So I kind of warmed to it as it went on. I mean, like first I was kind of like, give me the old action. I get what you're doing with it now, though. It makes
Yeah,
sense to do it that way.
that's exactly what I was gonna say is I actually thought it like, ultimately, it did a really nice job of that in the end,
Mhm.
because I was with you. I liked the more maternal, older gravitas like, yeah, there's a lot of gravitas when you see, like, an older nun, you know what I'm
She
saying? Like
felt supernatural, like
right,
in the third one. She doesn't feel supernatural here, and she's supposed to be more supernatural in a way.
but
But again, it makes sense to the dream universe kind of thing. It ends up making sense.
I also think that there's a and this might sound a little weird, but I also think there's a little bit of trying to get the teens to pay attention to her,
Mm.
and so to like, this idea of having a look that is closer to what they will respond to, weirdly enough,
Right.
and this idea because Alice is so young that the version of Amanda she's seen is young, because she's kind of coming to her in that regard.
I also want to throw in there actually what something that helped me get to it also is that there's also this running theme of like this is all happening mostly inside of Alice's head, and
Right.
Alice is like in a part of all these characters. Like Alice is a part of Freddy in this one. So Alice,
Yes.
this is kind of like the Alice Amanda. I mean, it says it very clearly. She's in the costume, she's in the nun outfit, she has
Yep.
the thing on. So when the real Amanda comes out, it's still like Amanda with a bit of Alice in her. So that's what makes
Right.
her younger and more that
Yep.
age and everything else. That worked for me as well, for sure.
Yeah, so I think it's all kind of wrapped together to that point,
Yeah,
and
100%.
it just kinda lands. It's a choice. Of course, it's a choice, but it's one that I can get on board with. It actually very much works.
Yeah, this whole
Um,
film is like that for me. Like I mentioned before with the Freddy thing, it's a lot of things where it hits me. I'm kind of like, I don't know if I like that. I don't know. I kind of don't love that. But then, like when I sit in it and it's something that Ken Knapsack always says it to me and everything else as far as like
Ken
writing movies.
Knapsack.
The great Ken Knapsack from Force Center. You gotta take a movie in. You gotta watch a movie and try to take in what they're telling you, the world they're giving you, and not have your own preconceptions on things.
Yep.
Preconceptions can ruin things for you. But if you take it in the story that they're giving you, and that way, if you look at it through their eyes, a lot of things make more sense, and you can accept it more easily. And it becomes instead of being a gateway that closes you off to the movie, you can kind of open it up and go, okay, I'm going to go with you on this journey, and you're going
Yeah,
to
yeah,
see. It's hard to
it's the
do.
thing
It's
I've
hard to
always
do
pushed.
sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I do that because
Yeah,
of that. It's hard to do sometimes. Like I had that instinctual, like, but like, as if you let it sit there, okay, let me see where you're going with this, and
and
a
that
lot of
doesn't
times it
mean
does.
yeah, and it doesn't mean you have to like everything.
No,
Like,
absolutely not.
things that it's so weird because I've run into this all the time. Obviously, we talk about this a bunch. If you've listened to the episodes where we talk about Indiana Jones, like clearly, I love all the Indiana Jones movies, like all of them.
Yeah,
That means Yes, I love Crystal Skull, I love Dial of Destiny, like, I love Temple of Doom, I love Last Crusade, I love Raiders, I love them all.
Right.
They're all my babies, they're all my darlings. I almost hate choosing which one is I like more because on any given Sunday, like, I don't know, man, like, Last Crusade might be my favorite of that franchise, and then tomorrow it's Dial of Destiny. I don't know. I like Indiana Jones so much, I have the nicest tattoo now on my
It is
right leg.
it is awesome, by the way. And
Thanks, buddy.
can I interject real quick? It's very humorous to me that you're mentioning this now because I just listened to Force Center earlier today when I got up and they did an episode today, and
Uh-huh.
Ken mentions you as part
What?
of. He mentioned you because he's talking about Dial of Destiny. He was talking about Mangold,
Yeah,
rumors about Mangold in the Star Wars movie and everything else. And Ken brings up how he loves Dial of Destiny, Dial on Hill, and he mentioned you coming out of the theater and like having a really big emotions about it. And everything else. I'm like, I
yeah.
know. He tells me about it all the time. I can't get away from him talking about it. I love
I literally will not stop talking about Dial of Destiny.
and I love it as well.
I fucking
So
love Dial of Destiny, man,
I
and, like, it's so funny because he's not wrong, like, I've put it on, like, 3 times at the bar in the past 2 weeks, and people are like, "Why is this on again?" And I'm like, "Because I'm gonna make all of you like it by the time this is done. Like, you're now in my world, and I will make you understand." But, like, the truth of the matter is, like, you have to go into all these things and you watch them the story that they're telling. And the
absolutely.
thing that I run into with people is they go, "Well, you just like everything. You're not critical of things." And it's like that couldn't be farther from the truth. The problem is I think the other side of that is people are too critical and refuse to be open-minded about things. And you have to find that middle ground of being open-minded and you can see a movie for what it is. You don't have to like every choice, but actually like play with it on its own grounds. Like try to be open to it. And I think that's why I liked this a lot more than I anticipated.
Same here.
Because I went in to just let it happen and like yeah, again, I had like the most visceral reaction to about the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Absolutely. I
But
get it.
after that, I was like, "You know, man, I'm on board. Like, this
And
is good."
I'm right there with you because like I am also considered too positive by most people. And I totally understand. I tend to like be I feel like, oh, you're not critical enough or you just like everything. I get that too. But I'm kind of like, you know what? At the end of the day, I went through a phase where I tried to be super critical on things. I was trying to be
Yeah.
and I was like almost like, am I trying to seem cool? Is that what I'm doing? I don't even know what I'm doing.
It kind of
But
feels like that sometimes, doesn't it?
yeah, like I gotta be cool about this. I can't like this. But like at the same time, I look at things afterwards. I'm like, you know what though? At the end of the day, I can be critical. I can be critical about a lot in this movie. And I said it to you. I'm like, I don't think this is a great movie, but I like it a lot more than I did. At the end of the day, is that a good thing? I mean, at the end of the day,
That's
I'm happy to be this way because you know what? It means I like more movies than you do. It means I get more enjoyment out of life. Hey,
yeah.
what can I say? You know
And
what I mean?
and the truth of the matter is like, again, yeah, man, like, I don't love everything I see. I seem to be one of the only people in the world who has bigger problems with Sonic 3, uh, on a Jim Carrey level than everyone else around me, and
We
that's
talked about
like,
that, yeah.
that's fine. I
Mhm.
I I still liked the movie, I
Yeah,
just didn't like every choice, but at the same time, I took it in as it was,
yeah,
you know? It didn't quite always work for me, but when it worked for me, it was very good,
yeah.
and that's kind of what this movie was, and ultimately, I actually think this is a pretty good movie. I'm not gonna say it's a great movie, you're not wrong, I mean, it's no Dream Warriors, it's not Dream Warriors is still the best of this franchise, but if
Easily.
this is where this arc of this is gonna end, although there's a legacy sequel to be had here.
Oh, I pitched this yesterday. I don't
Uh-huh.
pitch very many movies often, but I was hit while I was watching the movie that this is a movie that should be made today. I mean, you've already seen the man, and we're skipping to the ending here at this point, but there is a movie to be made about a grown-up Jacob who has become like a Freddy. I don't want to say connoisseur is the wrong word, but a Freddy expert. And like in this franchise, in this world, Freddy has finally expanded past Springwood and gone like nationwide or worldwide. And I feel like Jacob would be traveling around like a monster hunter, kind of like almost like a Van Helsing of Freddy, where he goes around
Yes.
town to town, like teaching like teens about it. He hears about this thing going on. He goes to where Freddy is, and I was like, "Here you go. I got to tell you, listen to me, learn from my experience," because he has that bit of Freddy in him too. So he knows Freddy almost more than anybody else does. You could even have Alice is still alive. Alice could come back and be like grizzled grandma in a way, grizzled mom type
Yeah.
one. There's so many ways you can go. It'd be such a different Freddy movie, but something that'd be really kind of cool to see. Imagine a
Uh,
nightmare bounty hunter kind of thing. Like that's freaking pretty sweet.
That's kind of what they need to do now.
Like,
I'm convinced that the people at New Line and Warner Brothers just don't want to make money because the fact that this franchise has been dormant so long, like, and it's not a Friday issue, right? Like, Friday's issue is tied up legally.
right,
It is what it is. It doesn't make us happy, but it's the truth. Like, they legally are tied into not being able to do stuff.
right.
Fine. But Nightmare's been off the board now for a decade. Again.
There is like some legal thing, but the legal things are more like we don't know who owns it or who does what. I mean, the point is, I've
Not
ranted
enough
about
that
this
they
before.
couldn't do it, you know?
Right. No, I'm saying it's incompetence as far as I'm concerned as
Yeah.
well. I've ranted about this before, and I'll rant about this. I ranted this in text to you, and I will not shut up about it. I can't believe that we live in a day
This
and
is your
age.
Dial of Destiny moment.
This is my. I can't believe we live in a day and age where Mike Flanagan, one of the more premier horror filmmakers, he does a lot more TV now as well, but one of the most premier horror storytellers of our
Horror?
time.
Horror?
Horror. I'm from Boston now. Different thing. Horror. He's got a whore, the back seat. No, anyway,
I just
Mike
thought you had a
Flanagan.
speech impediment, buddy.
Mike Flanagan, who we absolutely
Oh,
love.
God. I mean, Mike Flanagan's one of the best working filmmakers in the world right now.
And one of the most, like, he's also one of those like us that he loves film so much and talks about.
Oh!
His podcast is great as well. But let me
I
finish
need
this
to
thing.
pause real fast to this point. I remember now what I was going to say about the Brett Goldstein of it all, too, before I lost our train of thought while we were talking about it. Brett Goldstein's favorite horror film of all time is The Conjuring 2.
Which is such an awesome
Which is so funny because if you go back and listen to us talk about The Conjuring 2, we had that at the top of the franchise.
Yeah.
We like went so ham for why we love that movie so much. And then I heard Brett Goldstein start talking about it, and I was like, is this really happening?
Right. Because we're the only one. We thought we were the only ones.
Yeah, 100%. And I was like, oh my God. I just want to have a drink with Brett Goldstein so bad and just talk about movies because I find him beyond brilliant. Like, and then that just made me happy. Okay, continue to Mike Flanagan.
I will actually continue your interjection and go back. I actually like the podcast so much and want to be with Brett Goldstein so much. I actually want to ape his podcast just once, so like you and I could do our own Films to be buried with, talking to each other about it.
You know how many times I've been like, hey, we should just do one just as a joke, and hopefully it ends up on his radar, and then he reaches out to us.
Hear me now. But anyway, I agree. I don't. Yeah, I love that. But anyway, Mike Flanagan of it all. So we live in a day and an age where Mike Flanagan, and you've heard me say this before, I know on many podcasts, so I'm sorry if you've heard me before. Mike Flanagan, premier horror filmmaker, horror storyteller, has a pitch for a Nightmare on Elm Street movie and stated out loud he didn't know who to pitch it to, and nobody at New Line could tell him who to pitch it to. How does that happen? How does that happen with a franchise? This is not like, I don't know who to pitch this story to. This is one of your. This is New Line Cinema is the house that Freddie built, and you don't know who to pitch it to.
But in you know what? I really blame New Line for this in a lot of ways. Not just in like a incompetent sort of way, but I honestly also wouldn't be shocked if they were just trying to usher him out the door because they're still trying to distance themselves from it. Because they've been trying to distance themselves from it since the 6th movie.
Yeah.
Like that was why they did Freddy's Dead. They like Nightmare had a TV show and Nightmare was more popular than ever. Like it kept making money and it was doing so well. And they were still like, fuck it, we're killing the franchise. Like that is not what, like sometimes sure. But like Friday the 13th, they stopped making it because it stopped making money. Not that it was not making money, but it was making less than the previous entries.
Right.
Nightmare wasn't doing that yet. Like Nightmare was still making money. What the fuck, dude? Like, why on earth?
Right. I don't understand it. I still don't understand it at all. You had a cash cow, and especially when you have something like, we mentioned this before in the podcast as well. Freddie and Jason, or I'm sorry, Jason and Michael can take breaks because you don't necessarily need the actors to play. But almost anybody, you can put somebody in a mask and be Michael Myers. You can put somebody in a mask and be Jason. And that's not to denigrate the actors who have played them because they all have their great moments. Kane Hodder,
100%.
Derek Mears, they have great moments in the costumes and they do add to it. But it is believable that you could put somebody else in that mask and be like, okay, it still feels like that Jason.
Yeah.
Freddy is that different story. So you're going to kill the franchise when Robert Englund is still young and kicking. And now Robert Englund can't do it anymore. Like he's already said the only way he can come back is if he didn't animate it and he voiced it. And that's the only way he could do it, which is unfortunate. But you miss how many years has it been? We had Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out, 94, I think it was.
Yeah.
94. And then we had Freddy vs. Jason 2003. And like, so you missed out on so many years he could have done it. It's
Mhm.
20 about 20 years he probably still could have hacked it and done it, and you just gave up on it.
Well, and not just that, I'm also gonna argue that this is the bigger problem with kind of I've argued it before and I'll say it again. I think almost every character can be recast in some capacity. I argued that I think that letting Indy die with Harrison Ford is a mistake because it's a character that can continue to be fun and interesting given the right stories. Um, and I would say that about Freddy also. And I would say the one thing, because we are going to talk about the remake, unfortunately, the remake is terrible, but I think Jackie Earl Haley's actually very good in it.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a great actor. He
He's
can
a
do it.
great actor. These characters can be played by other people. And so it's still even more incompetent that even if they didn't want to use Robert Englund anymore, right? Maybe they thought he was too expensive. Maybe they just wanted to get away from it. But you're still saying that over the last 20 years, basically, there was no world and nothing to do, and you couldn't figure out a way to use these characters. And I'm never, ever going to understand that.
No.
Um, and it's weird because I would also argue to your point because there is clearly a sequel here to be had. Because this is actually the first time that I feel like you could really fully do a legacy sequel. The fact that like 4 characters were actually left alive is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, holy, that's impressive that like
I-
4
I-
characters made it.
Now, granted, had they made another like I'm not even talking about Freddy's Dead, but like another direct sequel like this one, they
Right.
probably would have killed them off like they did the Dream Warriors at the beginning of 4, but I digress.
Probably. Well, I'd be okay with killing Yvonne. I'd be okay.
Well, yeah, I and I'll say this. You had texted me and you were like, "I actually like the characters in this movie more than I probably should." And you know what? I'm actually with you.
Yeah,
I like most of the characters, but I will say this, I think that Yvonne might be one of the worst horror characters of all time. And I'm not
yeah,
talking just this franchise. And you know why? Because I get it when it's the parents. I
right,
get it when that's the character that is being like, "Oh man, you're just crazy, whatever, whatever." Like
right.
that there's a great moment in this movie where Dan's parents come. I legitimately love this sequence
Me too.
because it's a real human moment, but they're like, "You should give us the baby when it's born because you clearly can't handle it because you're crazy." And like they're really like taunting her and like really being very fucking awful. And I love it because Alice fights back
Yep.
and is like, "This is my child. I'm going to raise it like I'm not crazy."
And her father fights back too, which I loved
Yeah,
as well. I like
which I
that aspect of it as well.
exactly. Again, it's incredible. So, miss me with the fact that her best friend, Yvonne, is gonna be acting like that. Like,
Yeah.
it is such a it's so grating, and the problem is it's not like once or twice. This lasts for an hour of the movie.
And and I want to say also 2 things about it. First of all, it's nothing to do with her Kelly Jo Minter's
No,
performance. Like,
she's
her
great.
performance is great in it. Yeah, exactly. It is the character, is how that's the way she's written. But also, if you're gonna give us a character like that, that character kind of really needs its comeuppance. Because you can have horror
Yes.
characters that have these kind of tropes, but they're the ones who get killed in the end or whatever. Because you're kind of like you need that release, that cathartic. I know it sounds like we're really psychotic here. We need that catharsis. If she's a bitch, we have to kill her. No, but like that's a horror movie thing, though. When they work against the lead for so long, they tell her she's crazy for so long. Getting her comeuppance is that kind of like, see, you should have listened to her, and that's exactly how. It's like the reward, risk reward kind of thing for her, and we don't get that because she survives the movie. I
Right.
mean, maybe they're trying to turn the trope on its head, maybe, but it doesn't really work when that's the way it goes.
No, like, look, I love that Alice shows up and saves her. I love all of that, but again, you're right, like, because there's not even like a really an "I told you so."
Right,
It's the, "Oh my god, it was real. You
right,
weren't lying,
right,
and that's it." And then we move on. And
right, right,
it's just very I don't know, that's the one thing in this movie that doesn't quite work for me,
right.
and I've never loved it, um, and I found it extra grating this time because
I
I
agree.
don't think she needs to have a character like that in her life, and it's like, even Mark keeps being like, "Stop. Stop being like this." And
Right.
Mark, what a good character. What a great character.
Well, I
Because
want to get to Mark. Give me a second. The last thing I want to say, Yvonne, real quick before we transition to Mark, because I want to talk
Mm,
Mark as well. Um, you could have a character who is skeptical, but there's a difference between skeptical and like overbearing. How she gets
Yes.
overbearing about it. And that's the issue. But let's go on to Mark, because honestly, Mark, favorite character of the film for me, as far as I'm concerned, such a well drawn character. And I threw it in there as a text. I
Oh, I
honestly
was gonna say, I
don't
was
like.
about to credit you for this because I thought it was such a great, observation that I never would have considered because it was this is actually one of the few times, and I'm not gonna say that I was texting you a ton during the movie, my thoughts,
Right.
but there were a couple of times where I was like, "Huh, this is interesting," because I like that's kinda how I take notes is I send you little, like,
Yeah.
something, and then I kinda, like, move on, and I just keep watching the movie.
Right.
But I sent you something about Mark, and I was like, I really like his character, like, just in general, and you were like, "He is the prototype for Randy in
Yes.
Scream." And
Yes.
you are so right. Like, this is the prototype of that character.
Yeah, it is. We love Randy's are one of our favorite characters in Scream and Scream 2. But Mark is that guy. He is the geeky guy in a time where geek is not a cool thing at all in the
No, they're
80s.
mocking him all throughout the movie too.
Whole movie. I mean, Randy is at a point where it's starting to turn a little bit, but Randy's like in the heart, the darkness of it.
Yeah.
But he is one of us. He has these comics strewn around everywhere. Like see Marvel like actual
Posters
Marvel
and
comics
stuff,
and
like, with
posters and stuff.
Wolverine and yeah.
He's an artist, but he's got like, oh, he's the big like yelling at Dan for being a big jock and everything else. But he believes he knows the rules. He's someone who's open to the possibility that something is happening, which is what Randy is. Randy's open to this a lot of weird possibilities, a lot of conspiracy stuff. But Mark has this idea of like, I'm gonna believe her. I'm gonna do the research. He comes back with like this big look, this is real. Yvonne,
Yeah.
like, shut up. This is real. And he's so supportive throughout the entire film. He's like the most supportive character. He's got the unrequited love bit with Greta, but he's not creepy about it. He's just that like
He
it's
just loves her and yeah. But
and
he's
at
not, like,
time,
mocking her, it's not
yeah.
weird, like
I feel like it's just unrequited love bits have turned on like in movies recently. It feels like if you have unrequited love, like they play it like you're a stalker. It's
yeah.
not necessarily the case. You could actually have feelings for somebody and not be creepy about it. Just be sad about it. And be like, you know what? Yeah, she doesn't love me, but like I still love her. I'm still going to do anything for her, and I would die for her. I would fight for her and everything and everything else. Just, I have feelings for this person.
I
She
mean,
doesn't. He's good at it. He's good with her though. And he tries hard
yeah, and
for her.
here's the thing, he also understands, and he's like, "Look, it is what it is, and she's still also my friend." And
Yeah.
I really appreciated that because
Right.
I think you're right, I think a lot of the time we push that trope to be like, it's a creeper, it's weird, it's
Right.
strange, like a lot of the horror movies do it all the
Right.
time,
And
generally speaking.
I'm not saying that doesn't happen in real life because it absolutely does. There are
Yeah,
people out
no
there that
one
are,
neither of us are saying that.
but not every character is that way. There should be some kind of. It's nice to have representation of somebody who is just a guy who fell for somebody hard, who didn't fall for you back, but he's still going to be supportive about it.
Yeah,
That's what this guy is.
yeah, and I love to did you notice, uh, I feel like this movie kind of loves the New Mutants. There's a lot of New
Yeah,
Mutants comics and
yeah,
posters up in his room, and I kinda got the vibe that someone was reading the New Mutants comics and was kinda looking at all that and brought that into this,
yeah,
because there is a side of this movie that starts to become superhero-y,
yeah.
and that's within the stuff with him,
Right.
because you have this entire thing where a lot of his sequences are set in a comic book world,
Hmm.
and I really dug that. Like, I thought it was so cool, and it allowed like, we always know that there's the dream powers, obviously,
Right.
right? And so but to heighten it in the way that they do with it, like, even Freddy becomes, like, Super Freddy, which what a great that the Super Freddy thing, I love how jacked he looks, I
Yeah.
think it's so funny, it's so fun. Um,
I have
but
my
that
thoughts on
whole
that,
thing
but
no, no, no. I do. I think it's cheesy, but it's really fun. Like, because it feels like they're really playing off of, like, Dick Tracy type comics because of how he looks, because Dick Tracy, the movie hasn't come out yet. So, like, you're looking at it, he looks kinda like one of those, like, thuggy looking
oh yeah,
bad guys, and I love that. Um, this whole thing, man, it just kinda lands for me. The only thing I'll say is I wish that the sequence was fully animated and
yeah,
not live action.
yeah.
Like,
I agree with
that's
that.
it for me.
I will say I was going to mention this. This is one sequence that it kind of is one of those sequences that I didn't like at first, but I sat in it and liked it. This sequence right here feels to me like Nightmare 6 like really tagged in on and like
Yeah,
developed it further and almost went too far. That's one of the reasons I don't like Nightmare 6 as much. I mean, that could change. Obviously, I'll watch it. Maybe I'll love it a lot more this time through. I mean,
sure.
there's things I do love in Nightmare 6, don't get me wrong. But one of the problems I had with Nightmare 6 is it gets really silly and really over the top at times with Freddy and everything else. And that is very much this sequence with Freddy being Super Freddy and like the comic book. Like even Mark as a superhero is kind of like, okay, it's a little much,
That's kind of why I like it though.
but
And it's weird.
as a small part in the
Yes.
movie, it does work. It does work a little better, and that's why I said when I sat with it, as much as I said, like, I'm not a big fan, but overall, it does work enough in the movie that doesn't take me out completely. It takes me out
I,
just a little bit, but I get to it, and I'm like, okay, I'm still on board.
I still contend that if they had found a way to fully animate it, it would work
Yes,
better.
I agree,
Um,
100%.
and I think that's it more than anything, is that had it been had they fully gone for it, because they do a couple of sequences of Mark being animated, and
Yeah,
it's very cool. Like,
yeah,
I actually had to stop and I was like, "Wow, this is very, very rad." Like, I really enjoyed that. Um, I wish that they had gone the full way, because I think that would stop kind of what you're talking about, because if
right.
you see Super Freddy as animated, you no longer feel that like, "Oh, this is kind of equally goofy." Like, it'd actually probably be a little scarier because you
Yeah,
could push it a little more in animation, right?
right, 100%, 100%.
But again, I actually think it comes down to someone who also just kinda loves, like, New Mutants and was kinda playing with the idea of, like, the dream, like, their dream sequences and stuff in the New Mutants comics, and that kind of idea of, what if we pushed the powers that far? That allowed him to become that allow him to see himself as the hero, like this character he's been drawing, and it actually I love his death,
Yeah.
because this idea that he's torn apart as paper is
Mm,
kinda cool, like, within the
yeah,
comic, and he's being shredded. I love that. I don't know
yeah.
what it is, but it just really hit for me.
It did hit for me too, and it's partially because they grew up to it. We had the little establishing thing where he hates blood, even though he draws all
Yeah,
blood and guts and stuff. He's kind of a weak. He considers himself a weak character and everything else. But he actually does. He's actually one of the stronger characters of the movie. Like he does support his people 100%, and that's actually a definite kind of strength. So he gets sent off in a way, at least standing up to Freddy and not being weak. He's actually very strong. Unfortunately, just Freddy is just stronger. That's just the way it
yeah,
is, of course. But it makes him. I wish he could have survived in a way, but I also understand that he had to. He had to go as part of like his arc, and he had to kind of do that in a way. So he went out really well. And I liked his death a lot. His death was one of my favorite of the thing because and it's funny because it's not gory. It's
no,
because
it's
it's a
just a
paper,
cool idea. That's
but
the
it's
thing.
like
It's just a fun
it's
idea.
but it's something there's something actually even more horrifying about that though in a way too, which is why it kind of like stuck with me a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love a
I'm
character.
telling you, man, like, look, again, say what you will about the movie overall, like, you don't have to love it, whatever. The kills are really fun. I mean, even Greta's is disturbing.
Yeah, yeah,
And you know what? That's a perfect example of this movie finds a lot of different interesting ways for the kills in a way that don't feel new, or
right,
don't feel familiar. They feel new. And Greta's in particular, like her being around a bunch of people as it happens. It
right,
being this like nightmare sequence because she is like, they've all just graduated. They're talking about where they're going to be going during the summer. They're going to do all this stuff, and she's clearly got body image issues because of her mother. And her mother's been taunting her about that stuff. And Freddie honing in on that, and then like doing what he does. It's creepy and scary and weird. Like that sequence is so unnerving.
mm, I agree 100%. Her death was really weird, especially her mother being amped up the way she was. I'm
Right.
not sure like how much. It's almost like they wanted to intimate that maybe every time we saw the mother, it was from Greta's point of view, so she might have been worse than she actually was potentially. I went down that road a couple times in my head, but
Sure.
either way, the mother comes off really awful. Like I said before, worst parent in the franchise at this point, and that's saying a lot considering we had Kristen's
Yes.
mom and everything else. Um, but it served the purpose well, and Greta herself was really, really well done. They played her out throughout. She didn't have a whole huge role, but everything she said led to something more with her arc. So I kind of
Yeah.
dug it and thought it went well. And her death was very disturbing having people in there like laughing at her and like
Well, and
not
just
in
like
a
the food
isolated.
don't
Yeah, the
the
food just
way and the makeup and stuff, like everything about it just it's
and then when she
scary.
like goes to the fridge to talk to Alice and everything else, and
Yeah.
Freddy just grabs her back. I'm like, wow, that actually felt like something out of one. To be honest with
Yeah.
you, that really felt like
It
something really dark and disturbing at that point.
I love and again, this kind of plays into what I was talking about earlier, but to that point, that's why this movie feels so interesting because everything feels so dreamlike because there's so much of this happening in the real world in some
Mhm.
capacity, even though it's in Alice's head. But to her, it's real. She's
Right.
not asleep. The baby is asleep. And okay, this might be a step too far. I don't disagree. Like the baby dreaming thing is a little weird. But you know what? It makes for a lot of great sequences.
All right, I'm gonna say something right now, and I'm gonna declare it. I absolutely love that idea because
Love
I
it.
love the
Okay, perfect.
idea. I love the idea because I honestly thought like what I wrote down my notes at one point was what an interesting way to bring Freddy back because like a lot of times these horror movies, like the slash the monster's killed and it just pops back up, and usually there's very little reason why, very little. It's just kind of like, oh, he's there. Oh,
Yeah.
we stuck a metal pole in Jason and lightning hit, and now he's Frankenstein back up. Like it's like we just need to get this out of the way. They actually take their time and build a story
Yes.
here how he does come back. And while you can like disregard it or you could say it's not working for you, that's your miles may vary.
Sure, and that's what I said. You may not like it, right? But I think it leads to a lot of cool stuff within the franchise.
That lore is built, and it's like, oh wow. 'Cause I mean, we obviously come to the point. Okay, Freddy's a demon. He's like kind of an immortal demon. He goes away sometimes, but he always does come back. But how he comes back is interesting. And to be literally reborn, obviously,
Yeah.
he's a part at like last film. You see him kind of like become part of Alice in a way because like he's part of the dream. Of course, he's gonna live in someone's dreams, in someone's head. He can
Yes.
kind of attach himself. And when he has a baby, an unborn child in the fetus, you kind of get in there and like he's like, of course you can enter in through an innocent child. And it's like I love the reveal when like she's kind of like, oh my God, unborn baby's dream. Because
Yeah.
like she can't figure out, like I've been awake, I'm not sleeping. What's going on here? And like she's like, oh wait, holy shit, is it my kid dreaming? And like that's even more. It actually ups the ante of terror because we talk about one of the best things about the Nightmare franchise is like you can't run away from Freddy because he's in your dreams. So like if you're
Right.
sleeping, the only thing you can do is stay awake, despite it's like the adverse effects on your health. Now you have this, which is you can't even control that because you can't keep your unborn baby awake.
Yeah.
Like, it's like that's
Oh,
even
it's
more
great.
terrifying. It's like I don't know when it's gonna happen now. I
No,
can't even. Coffee doesn't work here.
it's so good, man. And like honestly too, it also introduces Jacob, which is going to be her son, and
Right.
he is a character. I love
Yes.
that he's like we're seeing his consciousness
Right.
within the dreams.
Right.
And here's the thing, Whit Hertford is one of those kids. You've seen him. You all know who he is because you've all seen Jurassic Park. He's the kid
Yep.
at the beginning who he gets the whole story about the Velociraptors that Dr. Grant does. That's him. He plays it. And a horror franchise, bless you, a horror franchise is always going to get to the point that you're going to have a creepy child in some capacity.
Absolutely. I
If
mean,
if
Nightmare's
you
full of
have,
them.
yeah, I was going to say, but and Nightmare is full of them, but this one in particular because he's kind of actually a character, it actually like he kind of looks like he's a Damien Omen type, and I kind of love this idea that Freddy is in his head and convincing him that his mother doesn't want him and he doesn't understand like why this is happening and he only sees Freddy as a friend, like the imaginary friend. Like that whole thing is great.
The
It
image of Freddy
works.
with his hand and the clawed hand, like taking his hand, it was so
Yes.
powerful. I was like, holy shit, this is deep. And yeah, the whole like, when he's like yelling, like, why don't you want me? Why my Freddy says you don't want me? What did I do? I didn't do it. It's so touching and powerful to a degree. And
Yeah.
I gotta say, with Hereford also, which I found out I did a little bit of a deep dive. I didn't know he voiced Quirky in the Clone Wars, Satine's
Yeah.
nephew. And I was like, oh, wow, cool. If you look at his Wikipedia page, I swear to God, you need to get this guy in a remake of Children of the Corn.
Oh yeah,
He actually looks like Jake.
he
It looks
does.
like I'm like, this is so freaking terrifying in a way. But yeah, no, I loved the entrance of Jacob as a character. I thought
No.
it did so much for the film, and even though like it was pretty I think I don't know if they were trying to make it a mystery and it was just obvious. I can't tell if it was just kind of one of those things where like, well, you know who this is, even if Alice doesn't quite at first. But I mean, we kind of knew right away like that. Oh, especially because like he has the conversation with Yvonne. He's like, oh, we don't have any kids in the realm or
Yeah,
whatever.
I kinda love that though. Like, it's a fun
Don't
kinda
confirm it
mystery that
quite
you
yet.
know what's happening, like,
Yeah,
you're ahead of them, but, like, I dig it. It's fun.
predictable but satisfying in a way.
Yeah.
Like yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
cool, 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 cool. That
Um,
makes sense.
and I texted you this, and it's very funny, and I you know, I love horror movies, but this is another one of those ones where you wonder why so many it's so funny how people treat horror because this movie, weirdly enough, is like an arguably not like it's a pro-choice movie, but also like it's kind of arguing that you should always have the kid. And the fact that there's an entire sequence where it's like, because they even do, Mark goes, there's one way we could stop all this. And she's
Right,
like, "No,
right,
I'm keeping the baby. I'm keeping the baby." Then you have the parents being like, "You need to give up the baby. You need to give up the like, or just abort it." But either way, like and then this whole sequence where he's like, "Why didn't you want me? What? I didn't do anything to you. Why didn't you want me?" The movie like really takes a stance on
yeah,
this
it does.
issue in a way that like people aren't wrong that, like, weirdly enough, horror movies kind of bend a certain way sometimes. Why is Jason killing the teenagers who are having sex and doing drugs? Like, et cetera, et cetera. And so it just kind of was funny that that came around in this because for all intents and purposes, like, you don't really consider that, but you're watching it. It's like, boy, it kind of took a weird stance.
Yeah, it
Not
did.
a in a not a bad stance, but just, like, it takes a stance in a way that kinda leans what you wouldn't anticipate.
Right, and I don't and the funny thing is, like, about it to me is that you don't know for sure if that was the intent or just the way the story went.
Right.
And like, cause like I can totally see Steve Thompson going, "Well, I didn't really intend that. I needed an emotional sequence between the baby and Alice because that's what the crux of the story is. It's the fight for Jacob's soul in a way, Alice versus Freddy in a way. But you're not wrong. You look at it and go, is this trying to say something? It might be.
Yeah, and I totally don't think it is, right? Like,
Right,
I just think it's so funny because you they talk about that in Search of Darkness, they talk about
right,
it in, the Crystal Lake Memories, like, every one of these docs that kinda talks deep diving about horror, they
right,
always end up in the same situation where people start talking about it, they're like, "That was never our intention, it just
right.
comes across that way."
Yeah.
But it's just very funny because in a world where everything is politically heightened, um, it's hard to not see it.
Ignore it. Yeah, it's hard to ignore it at this point. But we're also in a day and age where I feel, and this could be me getting older, because I lived through the 80s and 90s, but I really do feel like we had an era where there were critics and there were few, and that was their job to do, and the rest of us were just
Plebes.
accepting it and watching movies and not thinking too deeply on it, just kind of enjoying our movies. Whereas nowadays, it feels like almost everybody's a critic. Or
Yeah.
everybody's doing podcasts like we are. Hell, I'm not
Everyone
denying
has
it.
a podcast now.
Everyone has a
Everyone.
podcast, or everyone's writing up their own like multi-page reviews on Letterbox. It's all like we're all like trying to be really critical and be those critics. Whereas like like I feel like that's the type of film that being entered in the world now. That's the world we live in now. Back in
Yeah.
the day, like that, I don't think that probably ever came up back in the day because it was kind of like people were just like, whatever, it's just a film. Oh,
Yeah.
you're looking too deeply at it, man. It's just Freddy or the kid and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
It's
I think
just so
it's just
funny.
it is. It showcases where we've come in the world. And I don't even know. I'll say it. I'll say maybe this is me being grumpy old man a little bit. I think it's probably for the worse, honestly. I'm saying this as a guy with a podcast who loves
Yeah.
talking about movies. So in a way,
You're
I
not
think
wrong.
that's it. But it is what it is. What are you gonna do?
I
Don't take a
look,
shot.
Kevin Smith was right in 2001 when he wrote Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back about
100%.
everyone on the internet having a voice, and apparently everyone decided to use their voice to bitch about movies. It doesn't make it a good thing. Like, here we are, and it's still fucking happening, dude. Like,
Well,
what are you gonna do? You right?
what are you gonna do? And you know what? I love part of it because I love being able to have that voice and love having these conversations with you and our friends and everything else. But our
Oh yeah,
our,
and
our
look,
viewers and
I
stuff.
actually think for the most part, it's good that people have outlets. It's good
Yeah.
to be able to talk. It's good to be able to share our feelings and our thoughts. And, here's the thing,
It's
I
good
don't
to
think you and
care.
I also, handle this in a way where we're like, "Man, our feelings are the end all be all of all things." Like, this is just you and I talking about movies. We go
Right.
through a franchise, we talk about the movies, and that's what we do. Like, it
Maybe we look a little too deep into it sometimes, but that's okay. It's still fun.
no, but that's
It's all meant in
because
good
that's what
fun.
people come here for.
Right.
That or to
Absolutely.
listen to us not talk about the movie that we say we're gonna talk about, apparently. I don't know, like, either way, we get there in the end,
Yeah.
but it was just a funny thing. I just
Yeah.
happened to catch that while I'm watching it, and I was like, "Oh, this is definitely one of those things that people are talking about now."
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
not for any other reason than it's presented a very specific way.
Right. Absolutely. Um, let's talk about the third act now. The one we that is a little
Yeah,
messy and
where it
everything's a little
falls
get in
starts to
there.
fall apart.
We kind of ignored it a little bit. There was a great sequence in the third act, I will say, production-wise, look good. I love the MC Escherness of the stairs and everything else. That's just a
Yes.
great thing to add to the dream
That whole
sequence. I
thing is
go with that.
fantastic.
That's a fantastic addition to it. Then we get the war for Jacob's soul, basically as it is. There are still some great ideas in there. They're just too messy to work overall. I love the idea that she finds Freddy anchored in her somewhere. The whole thing
Yes.
with like she takes Freddy out of her in a way that like we can't find Freddy. Oh, he's inside you. He is hiding inside you because that's
Yeah.
been the whole theme, the rebirth, right? The whole thing like that. I loved that aspect of it. What I didn't love, and maybe I missed it. I don't know if I looked away at my phone or something. Yvonne gets out of her thing. She's like, "Oh, this is real now," and Alice sends her to find Amanda Kruger's remains, which are kind of like you never know exactly what that was for. Like Freddy's remains in Nightmare 3,
Yeah.
I understood. Amanda being needs to be at rest. Like, why? Like, she's still coming out, helping and talking, and yet, like, supposedly, it was like almost like they had a crib note from Nightmare 3. Oh, the bone sequence that works. Let's
Yeah.
find another bone sequence or something like that. Because then, as she gets to the asylum, I love watching it. Yvonne gets in there, finds Amanda's remains, and they're just kind of like sitting there in the asylum. Wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
she was buried there. We had a gravesite for her. Like they didn't know like where she was, and was she was just sitting in the asylum all these years. Her bones were just sitting there. Like it just felt very
Yeah, it's I
was that
think the ideas are great, but, like, I was with you. I was like, "Really?
what
Like,
happened? What happened?
that's what we're doing?" Like, it just doesn't quite land.
Right,
I love, like you said, the rebirth, the thing, like, since that's such a theme, like, I love that. I think that's great.
right,
Um, I just think that it kinda loses itself, though, because you're
yeah,
never quite sure how it's trying to wrap up other than
right,
saving Jacob, right?
right.
Like,
And
that's
it,
it.
it brings Amanda back, like getting Amanda to rest. All of a sudden, she kind of becomes a superhero and some, and like almost becomes a Deus Ex Machina in a way. It comes down like, all right, I'm going to save the day. I'm going to bring Freddy back inside me now. We're going to take her out. Let's do it. And we end it like and part of me likes that ending in terms of because like okay so we're not killing Freddy in normal. It's not one of those situations where like oh we're killing Freddy and it's all over. Like
Yeah.
we bring inside and like the battle goes on forever. That's like the intimation is the doors start closing where they start breaking through. It's like
Yeah.
this battle is going to go on between Amanda and Freddy for a long time or whatever as it is.
Which
But it does in other ways feel like a cheap out cop out kind of way too.
it does, because it just doesn't land. Like,
Stand it doesn't
it
end.
just seems so weird because you
Right.
don't really get closure from it.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're stuck there now?
Yeah, right.
Like, I
Exactly.
guess, I mean, Freddy's gonna keep getting it torn apart by the inmates, maybe?
There,
But, like,
maybe.
it's just kind of a weird choice in a movie that seems to have a lot of actual good ideas and a lot of good choices that it doesn't really seem to stick its own landing
Right.
because it feels like that they kinda lost a budget and they were like, "Oh, fuck, we
We
just gotta
gotta
wrap it up,"
end it.
and he
Yeah.
gets stuck in that world and we leave him
I know, and like Amanda gets put to rest, and her rest is to be in a never-ending battle for the rest of eternity with Freddy. Like that's her
with her
rest
son.
with her son, right? That's her rest. That
Yeah.
just feels weird. It feels off. I mean, we do get the happy ending later on with Alice and Jacob. Jacob being born, Alice being with her father, and Yvonne just hanging out there as well, and they're happily ever after, basically. But I
Yeah.
will say, I do like the very ending. It's one of the better tease outs that we get because we always get those tease outs. The light goes on in the nightmare house. Somebody laughs. Somebody whatever it is. Just floating backwards and seeing the little creepy girls there
And
singing a
hearing
little
the
bit,
rhyme.
I mean, rhyme whatever. That's enough to kind of go, oh, it's not quite over in a way. I like that ending as a good tease out in a way.
Yeah, I'm with you on the ending, of, like, the last shot. I like it a lot. Um, it's so funny because it's actually, like, a happier version of any of the endings that we normally get,
Yeah.
but with that last bit of, like, "Oh, but the girls are doing the song and all of that," but ultimately, you know that, like, it's real,
Right.
in some capacity, and it's funny because, again, and we'll talk about it obviously in the next episode, but, like, we never get any follow-up on this, and this is why, again, there's, like, a legacy sequel to be had here, right?
Absolutely.
Like, there's something to do here after all this, and I hope one day New Line gets their shit together and figures it out because you have a really good potential movie here, and, like, Jacob, Whit Hertford, who plays Jacob, he's still acting. Like,
Yeah.
you could so easily bring him back to make a new movie.
Absolutely. I feel like studios are too smart for themselves sometimes and too clever by half. Like a studio head will go, yeah, there's no real audience for that now. That's back in the 80s at this point. Like no one cares about those characters. No one cares about Jake and else. But like at the same time, I look at it and go, look, just go write a good movie,
And
have
people
the
will show
character
up.
be who it is. People will show up. And not only people show up, you do have a small contingency of nightmare heads like us who be like, awesome. And then
And
there are other people who just want a good nightmare movie. And just you
exact
can combine the two and get print gold
yeah,
or print money for it. I mean, it's
and
really
it's
no
funny
brainer.
because to your point, like, he doesn't even have to be the lead. You
No,
could very easily be that some new kids are starting to be terrified, and he ends up, arriving in town basically.
I would think he wouldn't be the new lead, and I'm okay with
Right,
that. Exactly.
exactly. Right.
Having him show up in there, that would be great.
It'd
Even
be
if it
Halloween.
is well received, it is well received. You could actually have him spin off and do his own thing later on. Like
Right.
it could be a way to do something like that potentially.
But it would be more like the new Halloweens where in some capacity, Jamie Lee Curtis is more of a support in the
Mhm.
first one than she is the lead of the movie. Like, yeah, it kind of
And
pivots at one point, but like
Anthony Michael Hall in Halloween
Halloween
Kills.
Kills.
Throw it out
The
there. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Halloween Kills fucking
It
rules.
does.
You
No, we
should go listen
stand
to our
for
podcast
we
because,
stand for that one as well. And if you
mhm,
don't like it, you are wrong.
girl, let me tell you. Yeah, that's another one I'm not gonna shut up about whether people like it or not.
We seem to have those ones, and we seem to be on the same page with them almost all the time. It's always like these
Yeah.
ones that everybody hates, and we're like, "What are you talking about? This is great."
And it always becomes, you know, "You like Halloween Kills, why?" "Here, I'm glad you asked." It's that meme where that it's like like where it says that someone is like
Yeah.
going crazy for like 4 hours in an audio. That
It's
is
like the long
100% how I feel every time we're
uh,
talking about it.
or it's like the long phone, like the
Yeah,
big long text.
yeah.
Like, exactly, absolutely.
It's
Uh,
that's how it feels, and, that's why I like that we do this
yeah,
'cause, it makes us feel good. It's fun. It's fun to actually talk about this stuff and get joy out of it.
funny enough, I will say real quick, I feel like we don't have one of those in the Nightmare franchise. This might be the closest thing we have to that in a way. I feel like this is
Yeah,
the one where we're
actually.
like gonna pitch in for that. 'Cause I mean, Halloween you have it for Halloween Kills, and Friday the 13th we have it probably for Jason X.
Yeah.
More than
Oh, it
anything
was
else.
definitely with Jason
Jason
X.
X, I think. And Nightmare, we don't really have that, but this is probably as close as you're gonna get to it. So it's still in a realm of the not light movies that we'll talk
Although
about and
I'll
go,
say
it's not bad. It's not bad.
no, but I'll say I think we really do we trumpet the idea that Nightmare 3 is the best Nightmare movie. So like we
Okay.
kind of have that too.
I like it.
I think that's a more common ground now,
Yes.
but like sometimes it's not.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
but we're it's all fun and games here. We're having a great time. But I
Absolutely.
would be very remiss right now. And I know that we're like an hour and a half into this basically, but we have to acknowledge what is happening right now in Los Angeles, a
Right.
place that I lived for over a decade. Like, really, really tragic.
Yeah.
These fires in Los Angeles. We have friends who have been evacuated. We have people that we know who have lost homes. It's just mind-bogglingly sad. There's so much devastation. There's so much hurt. There's so much sadness right now. I just hope that all of you are okay. It's there's not a good, you're all going through so much, and everyone is struggling, and I mean it's weighing on me because so many of our friends are still there, and like if I was still there, I would be living right in the middle of it because I was living in Burbank before I left. So it just seeing all this devastation at the beginning of a year that we were all hoping would like potentially turn over, only to
Right.
have this start all this tragedy and all this hurt and all this heartbreak. But if there's one thing I know about the people of Los Angeles is that no matter what, they are going to be okay because they are resilient. They stand together. No matter how terrible, no matter how hard, I just hope that you guys know that we are all with you. And there's plenty of ways you can donate and help people and be there for people who are hurting. Um, it just sucks. It's just so fucking sad. And I know that like I say that on the outside, but it's like I loved that city more than anything. I loved being there. I fell in love there. We worked on a show together there. Like that's how we became friends. Like
Yeah.
that this whole thing is so hard because like I just there's so much of ourselves tied to Los Angeles in the same way that just my personal history, and it's hard. It's just sad, and to see so much hurt, to see so much devastation, it's ripping me apart inside. But I also know that ultimately they are going to get through this. And so thank you to all the firefighters who are doing that, who are out there fighting, whether you are from California, whether you are from Canada, whether you are from Mexico, whatever, from the East Coast. There are people coming from all over the world to help fight and save Los Angeles. So to everyone who is doing that, to the people who are giving out food, to people who are opening restaurants and hotels and just trying to take care of the other humans around them, thank you. You are amazing. We love you so much. I hurt and I ache and I'm sad, but you guys are going to get through this. And to all the people treating their fellow humans like humans, thank you. You are amazing and we love you.
1,000%. I do want to echo PJ. You said I really couldn't add to that. You said everything that needs to be said and should be said. I mean, we are someone out there. I live in New York, far away from the fires, but I have been there now a few times. I went to LA for the show and everything else. I met a lot of my friends out there. I fell in love with like parts of the city and everything else. That it's just terrifying to think so many people I know are in such danger of this,
Yeah.
and it's hard to fathom that and try to keep it like it's trying to like it's hard to keep in your mind sometimes, not keep in your mind, but like it's hard to like just be aware of how affecting this is. I'm not living there. I'm not living there. I'm not seeing it, but I just hear stories and I can't even help but be affected. Having worked for as a first responder, like a dispatcher, things I know they're going through hell too. Trying to,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's calling them right now. I mean, I'm sure the 911 lines are letting up every 2 seconds. It's like I can imagine dispatching for them right now, trying to get people to places where like there's just not enough resources to deal with the emergency at this point. Like it's like you're an emergency, you're gonna have to wait till we get somebody cleared up. It's nothing else I can do,
Yeah.
and try to triage that and everything else. It's just horrible. But I wish you all well as well. You know that reach out to us if you need anything. I don't know what we can do. I mean, we've donated here, of course. We've obviously done things like that, and
Yeah.
you reach out as well. I'm always here to talk to you if you invent something. Obviously, anything you need from us, whatever I can try to give, I'm happy to try to give.
If we
Um,
just can give you a laugh for 2 hours
no,
or whatever, like, I mean, that was it, I felt a little weird that we didn't talk about it up top, but I wanted to be able to at least have a bit of fun
I want to be
before
reminded.
we you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, like, that's the one thing. I just want people to have a bit of fun, and so if we can get your mind off of things for a little bit or make you laugh or make you smile or you wanna fucking punch us through the phone because you think that the things we're saying are stupid, like, hey,
Right.
look, I just wanna give you a distraction. I wanna make you okay. Because, yeah, we're not there anymore. I'm not
Right.
there anymore. We're farther away from it than ever, and yet I feel like I couldn't be closer.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a good way to
And
say it.
yeah, like, I couldn't feel closer to it because I know too many people who are in danger. So, if we if you stumbled upon our podcast and you live in Los Angeles and you are going through this, either you went through it or you are still going through it, just know we've been thinking about you. We have been donating. We'll put a link or something down in the description too, just in case. Like if you
Mm.
don't know where to donate and you're listening to this for the first time and you want to, we'll link something. There's plenty of real outreach that you can do. But if all we did was at least get your mind off of it for a little bit and we could give you a laugh, then I am happy to say at least we could do that. We love you guys
100%.
so much.
100%. And yeah, and stay strong, stay resilient as you will. This, I know it's tough to say now, but this will end, and you will
Yes.
get past this, and we'll move on. And just but just do whatever you can to survive right now. So just keep breathing, keep moving forward, and help out your community and anything
As
you can.
Robert Downey Jr. said in Tropic Thunder, survive.
Survive. Right, absolutely, 100%. There
Yeah.
you go.
So I guess we gotta rank this movie or rate this movie.
Yeah,
Not
I guess
to,
so, yeah.
not to pivot super far off, but I wanted to make sure we got that in.
Yeah, because I would have forgotten it probably. That's the way I am. So keep
Yeah,
good things are
don't
gonna be
worry.
kept track.
I kept trying to figure out what I was like. What do we do? This? Like I said, I didn't want to do it up top. It's too serious.
Right.
I want us to have a bit of fun, and then we can do it.
Absolutely.
But then let's close this thing out.
Yeah, let's
So
do it.
you know, this is a where are we at with our ratings right
Right.
now?
Well, like we said on PLD Projects, we always turn things up to 11. So it's on a scale of 1 to 11. We have the first Nightmare on Elm Street. You both gave that film an 11. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, we both gave it a 6. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, we both gave it a perfect 11 again. Nightmare on Elm Street 4 was the first time we differed, and it was barely differing. I gave it an 8. You gave it a 7.5. So here we are with Nightmare on Elm Street 5. And I'm actually very curious to see what you're going to say now. I am very curious what I'm going to say, to be honest. I'm not entirely sure yet.
So here's what's interesting. I like it more than I like 4. In a world that I never thought I would end up in, but the more we were talking about it, the more I think about it, the more I'm looking back at it. For all of the things that I might find frustrating, there's so much I like about it. The world feels more alive than ever. I like a lot of the characters. I like a lot of the way that things come together. It feels kind of like a natural conclusion to the story that we started in Dream Warriors in some capacity.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna give this an 8.
An 8. All right, I get that, and I think it's kind of funny. We're gonna do a flip flop.
Are
I'm
you
gonna give it a
going a little?
7.5. I'm
Yeah,
gonna give it a
all
little
right.
lower, which is actually much better than I thought I was gonna give it. I went in
Yeah.
this going, I'm probably gonna give this like a 5 or 6. I thought this might have been worse than 2 at some points, but I'm like, I was really surprised at how much I really dug it. Loved the lore. It was messy as hell, but I did appreciate what it was going for. I thought I could use a little more Freddy at some time, and then I think maybe didn't use it, maybe used just the right amount. I still think I like 4 a little bit better as more of a consistent movie, but I will say I think the highs of Nightmare 5 are probably better than the highs of Nightmare 4.
It also doesn't kill off the entire cast from the previous movie, which,
Yeah,
points for that.
yeah. The one character kills off is someone I didn't mind getting killed off, so it's like, if
And
Nightmare 4 had just killed off Joey and that was the only one, it would have been okay.
yeah, 100%. I'm a little surprised I rated it so high, but, like, I legitimately really like this movie, a lot more than I anticipated, and again, like
Yeah.
here, I'm gonna say that thing again.
Shocked.
If I had known I was going to enjoy this as much as I was going to, I wouldn't have waited 15 years to rewatch it.
Wow.
Like, it's one of those, like, in hindsight, I don't think I would have waited so long, but here we are.
Now you know. Now you know, my friend. So now we can go back and watch it again at some point. And I'm very glad. I'm actually very glad we're going on this journey together because I know you were hesitant about this for a long time. You were holding back on it. You knew we were going to do it eventually. And I was definitely, because it was definitely part of the big 3. Could not do it. But I was also a little hesitant only in terms of like I don't want to drag you through something you didn't like. So I'm really happy to hear how much that overall you are enjoying the franchise and like coming through with it. So
It is so much, it almost became a bit that I was being so hard on it. But like I actually think like at the end of the day, I like these a lot more than I remembered.
right.
And maybe it was just because I was young and I just wasn't vibing with it when I watched them or whatever. Like they're a lot more fun than I gave them credit for. And that's a me thing. Now it's going to be real interesting because so number one, you could toss your schedule up real quick. We were supposed to come back next week,
right?
but I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Next weekend is my birthday, and there's no world that I'm going to be able to record next Tuesday's podcast. It is what it is. So we are going to push back 2 weeks. But what will be interesting about this one is I have probably seen Freddy's Dead more than any other film in the franchise. And I don't, but again, it's probably been close to 15 years since I've seen it.
Okay.
So I remember as I was younger enjoying it,
Right.
but I have not revisited it in so long. I'm actually a little scared to
I
because my memories of it are more fun than not. And
right.
now I don't know what I'm getting into and if
Okay.
I'm actually going to actually enjoy it.
Right. We're gonna find out together. I will say, not 2 weeks. We're pushing back 2 weeks in from this date. We're pushing back a week. So instead of the 21st, which I haven't made up a new schedule because we kind of decided this right before we began podcasting recording today, we will come back on the 28th instead of the 21st, probably for Friday for the final nightmare. I am also very curious to see too, because I know that this one, like I said, it sprung off the silliness of the comic book sequence in this one
Yeah.
for like a whole film.
Well, yeah, because I think they even said Rachel Talalay was like, "I really wanted to make sure that it was funnier because she didn't
Yes.
think this movie was funny."
Right, and, this movie kinda got like, there was accusations of being tired and dreary and
Yeah.
stuff. She wanted to spark it up. I don't know if it was exactly the right choice, but I do wanna say what I'm fascinated by is there are some really cool sequences in here, and let's put it out there, Rachel Talalay, this is, of course, Doctor Who. We know her from Doctor Who
Yeah.
directing.
Yeah, I was
Um,
gonna say that's a big thing for you and I, of
for us,
course.
right, absolutely, but she is director, the only female director of any of the big franchise movies. No
And she
female
was a
directors of
producer
Friday.
on almost all of these on top of
Yep.
it. So and
No
this is her
Friday.
directorial debut, which is
No
amazing.
Halloween. Yeah, no Friday, no Halloween. This is the only one. So what interesting to get a female perspective on a slasher in a way. So
Yeah.
that I watching this again with that in mind might also make these a little different for me. I'm kind of curious to see how that works through it as well.
Yeah, same.
Um, it's definitely also tags off that Halloween 6 thing, and is definitely off the reservation in terms of like how the story had gone so far. It's definitely kind of like we're doing our own thing. And
Sure.
see how it is. So, but I'm very interested to see how it goes too. Like, and I said, I thought 5 I wasn't gonna like, and I ended up liking it. So I'm kind of hoping that the same thing's gonna happen. 'Cause I remember not loving this one because it was too silly, too over the top. But
Yeah.
maybe there's stuff in there I can find and I can vibe with,
That
and we're gonna find out.
that's kind of what I'm hoping is that I remember that just it's kind of what we were just talking about. I'm hoping that I can go into it and go, it's just gonna be a bit of fun and
Yeah,
just like embracing the bit of fun. Because I like I said, I remember liking it as a kid.
right.
But and like again, I haven't seen it probably since I was 20, but like I used to watch this one a lot
Eh,
because this one used to be on the pay. We'll get into it, but it was on a lot on the
right.
like pay channels back in the day, like on Showtime and shit.
HBO. Yeah,
So like
absolutely.
for whatever reason, I've just seen this movie a lot of times.
Guess we're gonna find out. Guess we'll find out together. That'll be 2 weeks from now on the 28th as well. So, and then we'll go back to back to make up for it. I think the next week we'll actually come back
We'll
and
get
do
into New Nightmare.
West Cravens of Nightmare, which we both really enjoy. So that's definitely
Yep.
what I'm looking forward to for sure. As the journey to Scream continues in a way. That's what I always said. That like
Yeah.
it was like Friday the 13th, 6, Jason Lives, New Nightmare, that
Then
became
Scream.
Scream, and
Yeah.
that's kind of the journey as that goes. But we'll find out about that as well. This time, though, hey, where can the folks find you, PJ?
You guys can find me here doing the thing with Paul. Like we're having fun. We're working on something. I'm excited. We've been talking about something we might be doing over the summer. So it'll probably be an extension kind of what you guys are used to. But I've got an idea that I'm really looking forward to kind of having fun with, and I couldn't have asked for someone more knowledgeable on the subject in the same way that I am because it's something very near and dear to both our hearts
Absolutely.
and I'm pretty sure that there's 100 podcasts about the thing that we're gonna do, but we're gonna do it in only the way that we can, which is, mediocrely, and I
Mediocre,
can't wait. Yeah, and
long and
it'll be
distracted and tangentially speaking, and
yeah, but I mean, look, it's gonna be fun, and it'll be a nice time, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I will say the
Other than
hint,
that, like
our tangents, it actually fits very well with the subject we're covering. Let's put it that
yeah.
way.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, honestly, and I'm realizing now, uh, I've been watching a lot of this filmmaker's work lately again,
Mhm.
and not just that, but like some of the other stuff that they do on the side. And I'm realizing I'm like, oh my god, you when you listen to me talk, and I've had people say it before, they're like, listening to you talk is like listening to this
The
person
filmmaker,
talk.
yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
go, oh my god, you're right. Down to like my some of my hand mannerisms and stuff. I realize some of that comes from
Right.
that because I
Absolutely.
see them do this, and I don't mean to, but it's just this
It just
filmmaker has been around my entire life
right.
and very directly impacted me.
Absolutely.
So I'm really looking forward to being able to sit down and dissect some of that, and it'll be really
1000%.
fun.
1000%. I'm enjoying it too, so I can't wait to do it. So, all right, yeah, you can find me all over the podcast. Obviously, the channel here this is my channel. So my name's on the tin, as it were. Find me on Blue Sky, so I don't really f with Twitter much anymore. Um, I'm on there occasionally, but either way, you saw the schedule. That's what we're working on, minus the pushing Nightmare back a little bit. So you got a review. It's going to happen 3 times this month. We got we're going to finish out. We finished out the first season of the 2009 remake. Lego and I are going to go on to the second season. I got 10 episodes there to go through. Holy Snokes every week with of course with Maddie Gunner. Of course, this week's episode, Thursday's episode, the Skeleton Crew season finale, hopefully season finale, but I'd like to get a season 2 possibly potentially. And then got Crown Jewels every week, my Queen podcast I do, and Class Action Live coming back again once a month now. Once a month ish we're going to go with, and Projects back versus Dune 2. That should be a lot
You,
of fun.
I don't know why you're doing that. You were talking about this earlier, and it was like this show makes you mad and it makes it personal, and I want nothing to do with literally any of that episode because it's two things I like very very much that I
Well, in that way, the one thing about that is that it's good in terms of like I like both of them. So whatever wins for whatever category wins, I'm kind of like, okay, I can see it. It's
so
when
it's
like
not
something
a
bad.
AVP situation where if ever no matter who wins we lose.
Exactly,
Okay.
absolutely. That's what's okay with me for that though.
Is that sorry, not to cut you off, but
Yeah,
is that not one of the greatest taglines of all time? Like I know the movie basically doesn't deserve it because like it's not a I like the movie more than most people, but it's not good.
the first
But
one's
like what a
fine.
great tagline.
Great tagline. We should
Whoever
do something like
wins,
that.
we lose. Like
We should cover
what
that.
a tagline.
We should do like a ranking episode of something somewhere where we just rank taglines. That would be up there. I do like that one quite a bit. So
Yeah, I've always liked that one.
yeah,
It makes me happy. Oh
absolutely.
yeah, and you guys can find us up in the blue skies. I forgot to bring my handles up, but like that's pretty much where I hang out. Like you, like it's so funny because I realize now we use the same StreamYard link pretty much every time.
Mhm.
So I just go to my old messages on Twitter, and it's so funny because it's such a ghost town. But like I'll see like people mentioned us and stuff yesterday, and so I
Right.
went through and liked it. I never post anymore though because I it's a dead website to me with everything going on.
Absolutely.
It just made me laugh though because it's like I'm on Blue Sky more than anything these
Yeah, me
days.
too.
So if you need
Same.
me, find me there.
Absolutely. All right, that'll do it for us this week. Good. Next, we'll be back in 2 weeks for Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, and finish out Nightmare on Elm Street. Then we'll go on to our next saga. We've got a lot of stuff in the tank
We
and
haven't
plans.
really
So.
figured out like we really didn't we haven't made a decision yet, have we?
We haven't. We know what we're doing. We don't know when we're doing what at this
That's
point.
the
I
thing. Like
think we're doing Superman next, maybe because we got to lead up to James Gunn's Superman. Potentially, that was the
yeah,
idea we wanted to do. We might sneak something in there in between. I don't know. We'll have to look into it and see. But I think it's going to be Superman. But
it's kind of looking that
yeah,
way.
yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting because oh, I finally remembered. I finally remembered what one I wanted you to that we haven't done that I wanted to push into the docket.
Okay.
I've been sitting on this for like 2 weeks because remember I brought this up like 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Terminator.
Oh
How have we
yeah.
not done Terminator?
That's a
Like
good
it's
question.
horror and action.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We should definitely do Terminator.
That but
100%.
okay, sorry. I totally did that live because it finally clicked with me after all these weeks of what I had been thinking about, but it was Terminator.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of them along that line. We should do Terminator. We're going to do Aliens at some point. I'm sure we're
Yeah,
going to
yeah, yeah.
do Predator at some point. I think we'll do that as well. But like, we'll probably do Alien and Predator together. Probably just do it as one big, long
Yeah.
season in a way. I think it'd be kind of fun to do it that way. But
The
yeah,
the thing
Terminator,
I'm looking
absolutely.
forward to with Terminator is that I don't think people are ready for me to actually go to bat for almost every version of T3 that we've ever gotten, in some capacity. Like, I'm not gonna argue that each one of them is, like, a great movie, but we have had 4 iterations of Terminator 3, and I like all of them for different reasons.
Yeah. And the original Terminator 3, I think, is one of those films you and I both will definitely go to bat for quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I think I can't wait for that as well.
The
I'm
one
on
that
board with
people
that.
are gonna be real upset about is, like I'm gonna be like, "You know what? Genesis is really badly cast, but, like, most of the ideas are really good, and, like, there's a lot of that movie that's really good. I
I
just
will
wish it was
try.
better cast."
I will
It
try. I will
it's the
try. We'll see.
casting. It's the casting. Like, honestly, they fucked up so bad with the casting, and it's almost impossible to get past that. But like
Yeah.
the rest of the ideas in the movie are so good that I can look past most of it.
All right, I'll give it a shot. Try to think it that way as well, but we'll go for it. That might not be one I'm on board with you like I am with the other ones, but I'll always give it a shot again because I do find new things when I watch things all the time. That's a
Yeah,
great thing about film. Every time you watch something, every time you watch a movie, you can see something new that you never even thought of before. You can totally change your mind on something.
yeah.
So, all right, that'll do it. We will see you next time. As always, peace out, motherfucker.